On October 14th, 1989, 20 students from the small hill village of Dovemire vanished after morning assembly. When investigators arrived 2 days later, the school was empty, the desks still warm, the attendance sheet blank. Every villager swore the same thing: there had never been a school here at all. This is the story of what happens when a place decides to forget. If stories like this haunt you as much as they haunt me, hit subscribe. Autumn 2021. The road into Dovemire wound like an old scar through the hills. Detective Elena Morrow gripped the wheel of her unmarked car, the wipers brushing away a drizzle that seemed determined to erase the windshield. She had been reassigned here after 2 burnout leaves and 1 very public breakdown on live television, an outburst about systems that prefer silence. Now silence was all that surrounded her. Half an hour outside the nearest town, cell service disappeared. The GPS blinked out. She followed the printed map folded on the passenger seat, its edges soft from use. A note scrawled in another hand. Her late partners circled the coordinates. Dovemire Village. Case file number 4732, unsolved. She had been 15 when the 20 students vanished. The case had flickered across the evening news for a week before fading like the rest of rural tragedies. Her father, a journalist, had driven out here once. He never spoke of what he saw. Now, 3 decades later, the department had reopened the file after construction workers unearthed a row of school desks beneath a collapsed barn just beyond the village boundary. Each desk was marked with a child's name. Names that matched the missing list exactly. Elena slowed as the fog thickened. Houses appeared, sparse and colorless, roofs slouching under moss. A woman in a headscarf watched from her porch, unmoving. A dog barked once, then fell silent. The village looked asleep, not abandoned. Windows curtained, smoke curling from a few chimneys. Yet every face she glimpsed seemed blank, polite, incurious. At the old square, she parked beside what had once been a post office. The sign now read, Dovemire Heritage Cooperative. Inside, a single clerk sat behind a counter stacked with hand-stitched quilts. "Morning," Elena offered. "Detective Morrow. I'm here about the excavation up by the North Ridge." The clerk, a man perhaps in his 60s, looked puzzled. "Excavation?" "The desks," Elena said carefully. "From the old schoolhouse." He smiled, a patient smile used on lost tourists. "There's never been a schoolhouse here, Detective." "Closest one's in Briar Glen. 20 miles south." Elena unfolded the photograph taken 2 nights ago. Workers in hard hats, standing around the unearthed desks, the fog behind them glowing under floodlights. The man's expression did not change. "People bring all kinds of junk out from the woods," he said. "Sometimes they make up stories." His tone was calm but rehearsed, as if reading from a script memorized long ago. Outside, the drizzle thickened to steady rain. Elena returned to her car and sat for a long minute, watching drops gather on the windshield. She replayed the recording left by the foreman who'd called it in, his voice shaky, almost frightened. "We found something under the barn floor. Desks, 20 of them, names carved deep, and a bell still ringing when we dug it out." She glanced up toward the ridge. Beyond the mist, she could just make out a crooked shape against the horizon. The old bell tower. Elena started the engine. The road narrowed to gravel, then to mud. Trees leaned overhead, their branches knitting into a tunnel. The rain eased as she reached the clearing. There stood the remains of a barn, roof caved in, yellow tape fluttering like a warning. The ground was scarred where excavation equipment had been pulled out. She stepped carefully around puddles until she saw them. 20 rectangular impressions in the earth, each lined with splinters and rusted screws. The desks were gone, already transported to the city lab, but their absence felt louder than their presence. She crouched, brushing away wet soil. Her fingers struck something solid. She dug a little more and uncovered a brass tag, tarnished green. Room 2, Dovemire Primary. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint sound of a bell. 1, 2, 3 slow chimes from somewhere deep in the fog. Elena froze. The ridge was empty, yet the sound persisted. A hollow echo, old metal on metal. She looked back toward the car, half expecting someone to be standing there. No one. When she finally turned back, she noticed footprints leading away from the excavation site. Child-sized. Bare. They trailed toward the tree line and vanished into the mist. Elena's pulse quickened. She reached for her camera, snapped a series of photos, and followed a few steps into the woods. The ground smelled of rain and something older. Iron, maybe blood. The prints faded on the moss, but ahead she saw a faint glimmer, like glass catching the dim light. It was a window pane. She pushed through the undergrowth until the outline of a structure emerged. A single-room building, its roof intact, walls swallowed by ivy. A school bell hung crooked above the door, green with age. Elena touched the wood. The door opened easily. Inside, dust motes drifted through the weak light filtering from cracks in the boards. Desks stood in neat rows, 20 of them, each paired with a small chair. On the chalkboard, faint writing remained. October 14th, 1989. Attendance 100%. Her breath caught. If the desks were here, what had they found under the barn? A shiver ran through her. The bell above the doorway rang once, softly, though no wind stirred. She stepped back into the clearing. The fog pressed closer now, muffling the world. Her phone, long since searching for signal, flickered suddenly to life. One unread message from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have come back." The screen went dark. Elena stood in the silence, the mist thick as breath around her. Below the hill, the village waited, windows dark, as though holding its own breath, still asleep after all these years. Morning came gray and thin, the kind of light that never fully brightens. Elena hadn't slept much. She had spent half the night in her rented room above the old bakery, reviewing the archived photographs she'd brought. Grainy shots of the missing students. A class portrait stamped Dovemire Primary, 1989. 20 faces smiling against a chalkboard. Now, as the village stirred, the smell of rain mixed with the yeasty warmth drifting up from the bakery below. Somewhere a rooster crowed, then stopped abruptly. Elena buttoned her coat, clipped her badge to the inside pocket, and stepped out into the street. The lanes wound narrow between stone cottages, slick with rainwater. Curtains twitched as she passed. She recognized that studied politeness again, the way small towns look without quite seeing. The first stop was the parish office, one of the few public buildings still open. The wooden sign swung gently above the door. Dovemire Council Hall. Established 1907. Inside, dust and lemon polish hung in the air. An elderly woman looked up from behind the reception desk, her posture straight despite the weight of years. "Detective Morrow," Elena said, introducing herself. "I'm following up on the excavation. I'd like to review any property or census records you have from the late 80s. The woman's smile faltered only slightly. "That's quite some time ago. What sort of record did you say?" "School registries, teacher payrolls, anything referencing Dovemire Primary." The clerk's brow knit. "I'm afraid you've got the wrong parish." "We've never had a primary school." Elena kept her expression neutral. "You're certain?" "Quite. Children here attended classes in Briar Glen. Bus came every morning. I used to wave at them myself." Her tone was confident, but Elena noticed a tremor in the woman's hand as she reached for a ledger, the movement of someone aware she was being watched. Elena glanced around. On the far wall hung a panoramic photograph of the village square dated summer 1989. Market stalls, bunting, faces laughing at the camera. Behind them, the outline of a tall wooden bell tower rose faintly through the mist. Elena stepped closer. "May I?" The clerk hesitated, then nodded. Up close, the tower was unmistakable, the same one she'd seen on the ridge yesterday. "Where was this taken?" Elena asked. "Oh, that old thing. It was part of the granary," the woman said quickly. "Collapsed in a storm years ago." Elena met her eyes. "A granary with a bell." The clerk said nothing. Elena thanked her and left, heart drumming. By midday, clouds had lifted enough to reveal the ridge clearly. She drove back up, camera ready. The schoolhouse she'd found last night still stood, half hidden by vines. She circled the perimeter, photographing every angle, every mark on the wood. At the rear door she found something new, a small handprint in the grime of the window pane, fresh enough that moisture still clung to it. She touched the outline. Tiny, human. A twig snapped behind her. Elena spun. A man stood a few yards away, tall and wiry, wearing a heavy coat despite the mild air. His face was long, eyes pale blue, expression unreadable. "You're trespassing," he said calmly. "I'm investigating," Elena replied. "Detective Morrow, and you are?" "Cal Reeves, warden for this land. You mean caretaker?" "Same thing." His gaze flicked past her to the building. "You shouldn't be here." "Why not?" "It's dangerous. Ground's unstable. I'll take that risk." Cal studied her. "People round here don't like outsiders digging up ghosts." "Ghosts don't mind questions," Elena said. He gave a faint smile. "Then maybe you haven't met ours." Without another word, he turned and disappeared into the trees. Elena watched until the forest swallowed him. Then she went inside once more. The desks hadn't moved. On the chalkboard, a single new word had appeared, traced in the dust. "Listen." Her throat tightened. She took photos quickly, forcing rational thought to anchor her. Someone could have slipped in overnight. The word could have been there before and simply caught the new angle of light. Still, as she left, she noticed the air seemed warmer, humming faintly, as if the building itself exhaled. Evening fell early. At the bakery cafe downstairs, she ordered soup and coffee. The owner, a woman in her 40s with flour on her sleeves, brought the tray personally. "You're the detective," she said softly, setting the bowl down. "From the city." "That obvious?" The woman nodded. "We don't get many visitors." She hesitated, then leaned closer. "You're asking about the children, aren't you?" Elena met her gaze. "You remember them?" A small nod. "I was in their class." The year below, Elena's spoon froze mid-air. "You went to the school." The woman's hands trembled slightly. "Everyone pretends we didn't. They came, took down the signs, burned the records. Said there'd been a fire, but there wasn't." "Who took them down?" "Men from the county, and someone from the ministry, I think. They said contamination." She shook her head. "They told our parents it was safer to forget." Elena recorded quietly on her phone. "Why talk to me now?" "Because the nightmares came back when they found those desks." "What nightmares?" The woman's eyes filled with tears. "That morning, we lined up outside for roll call. I remember the bell ringing, then everything went white. When I woke up, everyone was gone. The teachers, the others, just gone. My parents said I'd fainted. Next day, the school was boarded up. Do you remember any names?" Her lips parted. "Marla Keene, Peter Dunn, Lyle." She stopped, breathing quick and shallow. "No more." "Please," Elena touched her hand gently. "Thank you." The woman pulled back. "Don't stay after dark, detective." The fog doesn't like being disturbed. Later that night, Elena sat by the window of her small room, watching mist creep down from the ridge. Her laptop hummed, photos of the chalkboard magnified on the screen. The word "listen" seemed to pulse faintly, as though the dust itself shifted with the breath of the room. She opened her recorder and spoke quietly, the way she used to on late-night stakeouts. Day 1. Locals deny existence of Dovemire Primary. First witness admits attendance. Evidence suggests organized removal of records. Psychological atmosphere. Collective repression bordering on induced amnesia. Possible environmental factor, but tone of fear suggests social conditioning. Further inquiry. Locate parish archives predating 1989. Interview caretaker Cal Reeves. Establish link between excavation site and surviving witness. A dog barked again outside. Then silence. Elena closed the laptop, but before turning off the light, she noticed condensation spreading across the inside of the glass. 3 words written by an unseen finger. "Don't wake us." Her heart stuttered. She turned quickly to the room behind her. Empty. Only the faint smell of earth lingered. Outside, the bell on the ridge rang once. Elena sat motionless until the echo died. The light on Elena's bedside clock blinked 2:47 a.m. She hadn't moved since the condensation message faded from the glass. The word "wake" still pulsed behind her eyes. Outside, fog pressed against the window like breath on a mirror. She rose, pulled on her coat, and slipped the recorder into her pocket. The air in the corridor smelled faintly of yeast and wet stone. Downstairs, the bakery ovens had long gone cold. She told herself she was only going for air, yet her boots carried her toward the ridge road almost on their own. The village was asleep, or pretending. Curtains hung motionless. Even the dogs had fallen silent. When she reached the first bend of the hill, the sound came again. A single bell stroke, thin and metallic, swallowed quickly by mist. Cal Reeves's cabin lay a mile beyond the tree line, a squat structure of weathered pine. She'd traced the coordinates earlier from the parish land survey. A single lamp burned inside. Elena rapped once on the door. No answer. She tried again, louder. Finally, the door creaked open. Cal stood there barefoot, eyes bright in the lamplight. Couldn't sleep either. "I have questions," Elena said. "I guessed." He gestured her inside. The cabin smelled of coffee and turpentine. Maps covered one wall. Topographic charts, forestry reports, all marked with thin red lines radiating from the ridge. "You keep good records," she noted. "Old habit." "My father mapped for the ministry before they closed this district, the same ministry that removed the school's records." He poured coffee into 2 tin mugs. "Maybe. They called it an environmental quarantine. Said radon from the quarry made people sick." "Did it?" He hesitated. "Depends on what you call sick." Elena studied him. "You remember the students, don't you?" Cal's jaw worked silently. "I was 16. Helped my father at the watch station. Heard the siren that morning, same one they used for chemical drills. When we went down, the place was empty." "You told no one?" "We did. Officials came by sunset, told us it was a training exercise gone wrong, threatened prosecution if we spoke. Prosecution for what?" He met her eyes. "For remembering." Rain tapped the windows. Elena unfolded her phone, showing him the photograph of the desks unearthed beneath the barn. "You saw these?" Cal exhaled. "They weren't buried there originally. The ground around the barn's too new. Someone moved them after when? Within the last year, maybe less. Soil still soft from the dig, moved by whom?" He gave a thin smile. "That's the question that gets people hurt." Elena leaned closer. "I found a word written on the chalkboard." "Listen. You know what that means?" Cal rubbed a hand over his face. "There's a story the old folks whisper. That the bell didn't call children to class. It called them under. My father said it was part of a monitoring experiment, sound frequency testing. The pitch could make you drowsy, disoriented, hypnosis. Or something deeper. They said the ministry wanted to test how long suggestion could last if reinforced through ritual, and the children. They became the experiment. Elena felt the air thin around them. "You believe that?" I believe I've been hearing that bell every night for 32 years. By morning, fog lifted to a colorless sky. Elena drove back down to the square. She stopped at the general store, where an old radio murmured regional news between bursts of static. The owner, a man in his 70s, looked up from stocking shelves. "You're the detective," he said. "Word travels fast." "Not much else does." He motioned toward the counter. "You looking for the mayor?" "There's a mayor?" He chuckled. "Name only. Helen Price. Lives at the edge of town. Yellow house by the orchard. Used to teach school before it closed." Elena paused. "She taught at Dovemire Primary." That's what folks said. But she won't. Not anymore. Helen Price's house sat at the far end of the valley, surrounded by apple trees heavy with rot. The gate hung crooked. Elena knocked once, twice. The door opened to reveal a tall woman in her 60s, silver hair pulled tight, eyes sharp despite the lines around them. "Detective Morrow?" she asked before Elena could speak. "Yes, I've been expecting you." Inside, the air smelled of lavender and old paper. Books lined every wall. Education manuals, psychology texts, parish archives stacked like bricks. "I heard about the desks," Helen said, leading her to a table. "I knew they'd surface eventually." "You were a teacher here." Helen nodded slowly. "Headmistress, though it feels wrong to use the word. After the incident, they erased us. Said the school never opened officially. I signed documents declaring as much. Why sign? Because they threatened to remove my husband's pension and charge me with negligence. 20 children gone under my care. I thought I deserved punishment." Elena's voice softened. "Tell me about that day." Helen stared out the window, where fog threaded between the trees. "It was a Friday. We had morning assembly. I remember the bell ringing 3 times, though we only ever rang twice. The children went quiet, perfectly still, eyes open but blank. Then they began to walk, single file, out of the yard. I tried to stop them. They didn't hear me. I followed as far as the ridge, then the fog rolled in. When it cleared, they were gone." She looked down at her hands. "The ministry arrived within the hour. They said it was a gas leak, ordered the ground sealed. I never saw a single body." Elena fought the chill creeping through her. "Why come back here?" Helen gave a faint smile. "To remember what everyone else forgot." "Did you ever hear the bell again?" "Yes," she whispered. "Every night at 3:03. The time roll call ended." Dusk. Elena drove back toward the ridge, the recording of Helen's testimony looping through her speakers. Outside, mist bled across the fields. When she reached the crest, she parked and stepped out. The bell tower stood clearer now, framed by fading light. She approached slowly. Wind rattled the rusted clapper. Her recorder caught the faint hum again, an undertone beneath the air itself, a frequency too low for words, but heavy enough to press against her ribs. She felt dizzy, disoriented. Then a whisper, not from the recorder, but behind her. "Detective." Cal Reeves stood at the tree line, face pale. "They're watching." "Who?" Before he could answer, headlights flared from below. 2 vehicles cresting the ridge, unmarked, moving fast. Cal grabbed her arm. "Don't ask questions now. Just run." They vanished into the trees as engines roared through the clearing, beams slicing the fog like searchlights. Elena stumbled over roots, the sound of the bell following. 3 measured chimes echoing through the forest as if answering the intrusion. Branches lashed at Elena's coat as she followed Cal through the dripping trees. Behind them, headlights cut through the fog in wide, deliberate sweeps. The engines idled, doors slammed, and voices, 2, maybe 3, barked short commands. They crouched behind a fallen trunk. Cal held a finger to his lips, listening. From below came the metallic groan of machinery. Flood lamps flared against the mist, bleaching the ridge white. "They're not police," Cal whispered. Elena strained to see. Two figures in dark windbreakers were hauling metal crates from one truck. Another man directed them toward the excavation pit where the desks had been found. The sound that followed chilled her, the hollow thump of shovels. They were filling it back in. "Why would anyone rebury evidence?" she murmured. "Because something underneath shouldn't see light," Cal replied. A siren wailed faintly from the valley. Just the distant night train, Elena realized, but it made the men below stiffen. One of them reached for a radio. Cal leaned close. "We can't stay here. They'll sweep the ridge." They retreated deeper into the woods until the lights vanished behind trees. The forest thinned onto a service path leading toward the abandoned quarry. Moonlight caught pools of standing water, pale as mercury. Elena's breath fogged in the cold. "You said your father worked for the ministry. Did he ever mention what they were building out here?" Cal nodded slowly. "A listening station. Underground. They said it was for geological readings, but I saw equipment. Coils, resonance chambers, speakers big as cars. Sound testing again. Yeah, the bell was only the surface version." They stopped near the quarry rim. Below, the rock face dropped 50 feet into black water. A single rusted sign clung to a fence post. "Property of the Ministry of Environment. Entry prohibited." Cal crouched beside a weathered hatch half buried in moss. "Help me with this." Together they heaved until the latch gave with a metallic crack. The smell that rose was ancient. Wet stone and iron dust. A narrow stairwell spiraled down into darkness. Elena switched on her phone's flashlight. "You've been here before?" "Once, but it wasn't safe then." He descended first, boots scraping concrete. The air cooled sharply as they reached a corridor lined with peeling tiles. Old ministry signage pointed to rooms labeled Archive, Acoustic Lab, Control. Elena's light flickered over a wall where someone had written in chalk, "We slept, but the echo did not." She felt her stomach tighten. "Someone's been down here recently." Cal examined the dust. Footprints, fresh ones, more than 2. From deeper in the corridor came a faint, rhythmic pulse. Not machinery, breathing or something that imitated it. Elena lifted her recorder instinctively. The sound grew louder, steady as a heartbeat, echoing off the walls. Cal's whisper was barely audible. "That's the bell frequency. Still running after all these years." The corridor narrowed until the ceiling pressed close above them. Rust flaked down like ash. Elena's phone light skimmed a trail of exposed cabling that disappeared into the dark. The hum in the walls grew deeper, a steady oscillation that seemed to pulse against her ribs. They reached a set of metal doors labeled Auditory Testing Chamber 1. A faded warning sign read, "Prolonged exposure may cause disorientation, nausea, or involuntary sleep responses." Cal's hand trembled on the handle. "They built 6 of these," he murmured. "Dad said they were experimenting with infrasonic fields, sounds you can't hear but still feel." Elena eased the door open. The hinges shrieked softly. Inside, the space widened into a low concrete room lined with rusted speakers. Wires dangled like vines. In the center sat a circular platform surrounded by wooden chairs, 20 of them bolted to the floor. Dust covered the seats, except for one near the edge. That one looked recently used. Elena swallowed hard. 20 chairs, she said quietly. For 20 students. Cal crouched near the platform. "Look at this." A pattern of grooves radiated from the floor, like the cut of a record, etched into cement. "Resonance lines," he whispered. They'd play tones through the speakers and watch how dust or sand arranged itself along the frequencies. Except they used people instead of sand, Elena finished. Her light caught something under one chair, an object half buried in debris. She knelt, brushed away the dust. A child's shoe, blue leather, faded but intact, laces neatly tied. Inside the tongue was a label, Dovemire Primary, property of School District 14. She felt her throat close. They brought them here. Cal nodded grimly. And whatever the experiment was, they never woke up. A soft click echoed from the hallway behind them. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Elena killed the flashlight. The humming continued in the dark, now joined by the metallic scrape of boots on concrete. Cal whispered, "We're not alone." They retreated behind the row of chairs. A beam of white light swept through the doorway. A flashlight, steady, professional. A man's voice, calm and detached, drifted in. "Whoever's in there," he called, "you're trespassing on federal property." Step forward. Elena's pulse hammered. She recognized the tone. Official, but rehearsed. Not police. Cal gripped her wrist. "We can get out through the service tunnel." They crept along the side wall toward a half-open maintenance hatch. The beam passed inches above them. Then came a second voice, deeper, familiar. "Leave them. They'll find their way out like the others." The beam shut off. Silence returned, except for the low, continuous thrum vibrating through the walls. Cal pushed open the hatch. Cold air rushed from below. "Come on," he said, "before the echo catches us." They slipped into the tunnel, the door sealing behind them with a hollow metallic clang. Somewhere in the darkness, faint as breath, the bell began to ring again. 3 deliberate chimes, each one lower than the last. They emerged just before dawn. The tunnel spat them out near the quarry's rim, where a thin orange glow pressed through the fog. The forest below was still, too still. No birdsong, no wind. Just the faint hum that seemed to live inside the earth itself. Elena wiped grime from her face, lungs burning from the climb. Cal pulled a small flashlight from his jacket and scanned the slope for movement. Nothing. The 2 trucks from the night before were gone, leaving only deep tire ruts and the faint smell of diesel. They stood in silence for a long moment. "Whatever they were doing down there," Elena said, "someone's still maintaining it." Cal nodded. "Someone with authority. That man, his voice. He wasn't local." Elena pulled out her recorder and checked the last file. The waveform was erratic, distorting each time the bell had sounded. "Every frequency between 30 and 40 hertz is corrupted," she muttered, like the audio itself was put to sleep. Cal stared at her. Maybe that's the point. They started down toward the village. Morning light filtered through the mist, revealing the quiet main street. The bakery's sign creaked in the wind. Nothing stirred. Yet as they passed the square, Elena noticed something new, fresh flowers at the monument. 20 stems of white bell-shaped lilies arranged in a perfect circle. "Who put those there?" she asked. Cal shook his head. "No one's been up this early." "Maybe Helen. She didn't strike me as sentimental." "Then maybe she isn't the one remembering them." They reached Elena's car by the old inn. She wiped the windshield and froze. Written in the condensation, same uneven hand as before, were 3 words. "They are below." Her breath caught. "They know where we went." Cal scanned the rooftops. "We have to move." "Not yet." Elena snapped a quick photo of the message before the words began to fade. "I need to get this to someone outside the parish." "Who do you trust?" She hesitated. "Nobody in Dovemire." "Maybe someone at the state archives. If the ministry really scrubbed the records, there'll be paper ghosts left behind." Cal gestured toward the car. "Then we go to the Capitol." Elena slid behind the wheel, adrenaline masking exhaustion. The engine coughed to life. As they drove past the orchard, she glanced toward Helen Price's yellow house. Curtains fluttered. For a heartbeat, a face watched them from the window. Someone younger than Helen, pale, motionless. Then it was gone. "Did you see that?" she whispered. Cal turned too late. See what? She didn't answer. The figure's stillness had felt unnatural, like watching a sleeper who was standing upright. They drove until the fog thinned and the road widened into the highway. The village disappeared behind the tree line. Elena exhaled shakily, forcing herself to focus on the future. You said your father kept his ministry papers, she said. Do you still have them? Cal nodded. In my workshop. I never threw them out. Then that's our next stop. He looked uneasy. You sure you want to read what's in them? Elena gripped the steering wheel tighter. After what we saw tonight, I need to. Cal's workshop sat at the edge of the valley, half swallowed by vines. The building leaned toward the woods, its tin roof dented, windows blind with dust. Inside, the air smelled of oil, pine sap, and old paper. Tools hung neatly from hooks. Against one wall, a cabinet waited under a tarpaulin. Cal hesitated before uncovering it. Dad told me never to open this unless the bell rang again. It's been ringing for decades, Elena said softly. He peeled back the tarp. Inside lay a row of steel binders, ministry seals faded to gray. Each spine was numbered in ink. He lifted one marked Project Somnus, Phase 1. Elena set her recorder on the workbench, switched it on, and opened the file. Photographs spilled out, classroom interiors, aerial shots of the quarry, and faces of children in uniform lined up before the bell tower. Beneath them, typed notes read, Subjects exhibit synchronized response within 3.7 seconds of signal activation. Duration of induced dormancy, variable. Her throat tightened. Dormancy. Cal skimmed another page. They were testing long-term neural suppression, low-frequency sound, to induce a collective dream state. She read further. Objective. Observe post-hypnotic retention following auditory isolation. Secondary aim. Test viability of group control through resonance conditioning. Control, she murmured. They were trying to make obedience permanent. Cal's face was ashen. They didn't just lose those kids. They kept them. Another folder contained a handwritten log dated October 17, 1988. The entry was short. Unexpected continuation of response cycle. Subjects unresponsive to reactivation attempts. Site sealed pending evaluation. Elena's pulse quickened. That was the day after they vanished. Cal pointed to a marginal note scrawled in red ink. Containment below successful. She looked up at him. Below. He nodded grimly. The tunnels? They kept searching through the binders. Phase 2 detailed relocation of dormant units to subterranean storage under Section D near the quarry's lowest shaft. Another file listed personnel transfers, including one name that stopped Elna cold, Helen Price, assistant behavioral consultant. She wasn't just a teacher, Elna whispered. She was part of it. Cal closed the binder slowly. She said they threatened her. Maybe they didn't have to. Thunder rumbled outside. A faint vibration tickled the soles of their boots, the same frequency hum crawling up through the floorboards. Cal froze. Do you feel that? The light bulb above them flickered, then steadied. It's starting again, Elena said. Before they could react, a low sound, half mechanical, half alive, rolled through the valley. Every loose object in the workshop trembled. Papers fluttered from the binders. The bell was ringing again, but this time, its tone seemed to come from everywhere at once. From the ground, the air, their own bones. Cal grabbed her arm. We have to leave. Now they burst outside into a silver rain. The hum deepened behind them, almost forming words, and for a brief moment, Elena swore she could hear voices layered inside the sound, children counting in unison, their rhythm perfectly even. 1, 2, 3. They were exposed during the trials. Residual conditioning. When the tone reactivated, it woke the signal buried in their brains. Elena stared at one of the glass pods. A girl's hand rested against the inside, pale against the fogged surface. The nails were perfectly clean, the skin unwrinkled. She looked 8 years old, the age she'd been when she vanished. Elena pressed her palm to the glass. They're alive, Cal. Barely. Their bodies are sustained, but their minds are caught. On the console, a warning light began to flash red. Signal amplification in progress. Cal cursed. Someone's boosting the transmission. From the intercom above, a voice echoed. Flat, bureaucratic, unmistakably official. Unauthorized entry detected. Phase 3. Reactivation initiated. Elena backed away as the hum deepened into a roar. The glass pods began to glow faintly blue, and the air vibrated so violently it blurred the edges of the room. Cal grabbed her shoulder. If this reaches full strength, it'll pull the entire valley under again. How do we stop it? He pointed to the main control column. Shut down the generator. Cut the resonance. They ran as the first pod hissed open behind them. Steam billowed out. A child's voice whispered, dreamlike, "It's time to wake up." The chamber pulsed with blue light. Elena could feel it through her skin. Vibration woven into heartbeat, into breath. The resonance had shape now, a living rhythm filling every corner of the room. Cal yanked open a panel on the generator. "Manual overrides fused," he shouted over the hum. "I'll have to pull the power leads." Elena gripped the console edge to steady herself. The display stuttered between strings of code and a repeating command. Phase 3. Initiation 60%. The air smelled of ozone and wet metal. One by one, the glass pods along the far wall hissed open. Steam spilled out in slow spirals. The children inside blinked into the light, eyes wide but unfocused. Their movements were mechanical, puppet-like. "Cal," Elena whispered. "They're waking." He tore a cable loose. Sparks leapt. The lights dimmed but didn't die. "We need a full power cut." She scanned the control board. Among the blinking buttons was a small red switch labeled Field Inhibitor. She flipped the guard and pressed it. Nothing. The hum only deepened, like the system absorbed her effort and fed on it. The children began to speak, not to her, but in unison, a quiet chorus rising from the fog. "We dreamed a long time. We waited for the bell. Are you the ones who called us?" Elena's heart slammed. "They're repeating something," she said. Cal's voice was tight. "Conditioned phrases. Part of the experiment. They think we're part of it." Another cable snapped free, showering sparks. The floor trembled. Overhead, loose bolts rattled from the vibration. A figure appeared in the mist. Helen Price, soaked and pale, her clothes torn from the fall. She moved with the same trance-like stillness as the others, eyes reflecting the blue light. "Helen!" Elena cried. The woman tilted her head slowly. "They never died," she said softly, as if reciting a line she'd waited decades to speak. "They've been learning to listen." Elena approached cautiously. "Helen, you have to help me shut this down." "It can't be shut down," Helen whispered. "It's awake now." Her pupils dilated. "We all are." Behind her, the children turned toward the central dais. The hum rose into a tone so pure it erased thought. An unbroken note that blurred the edges of the world. Cal shouted something, but Elena couldn't hear him. She could see his mouth move, see his hands reaching for the main switch, but the sound drowned everything else. The lights strobed faster, the air folding inward. Then, with a crack like thunder, one of the generator coils burst. The vibration stopped. For one heartbeat, there was silence. Elena dropped to her knees, gasping. The blue glow dimmed to white. Across the room, Helen Price was gone. Only her shoes remained beside the dais, neatly aligned, toes pointing toward the pods. For a long moment, nothing moved. Only the smell of burnt copper hung in the air. Then the first child stepped out of the fog. A boy of maybe 9, his uniform still crisp, eyes open but strangely clear now. Human again. Elena rose slowly. "It stopped," she said. "You're awake." The boy blinked. "Where is Miss Price?" Cal crouched to meet his gaze. "She went home, son." "You're safe." But the boy shook his head, small shoulders trembling. "No one goes home until the bell rings." Elena felt a cold tremor run down her spine. Around them, the other pods began opening, releasing more children, each one disoriented, murmuring fragments of old classroom chatter, spelling lists, roll calls, nursery rhymes. Their voices overlapped into a ghostly murmur. She pressed the recorder to her chest. Date, 4:12 a.m. Generator disabled. 20 subjects recovered. Physical age consistent with 1989 disappearance. Neurological state. Undetermined. Cal moved to the console. The screen now showed static except for a single line of text pulsing in the corner. Somnus field suspended. Stand by. Suspended, he muttered. Not terminated. What happens when it restarts? He looked at her, jaw tight. We might not get a second chance. A sudden metallic clang echoed through the tunnels, distant doors slamming open. The children flinched as if to a command. They're coming back online, Cal said. We have to get them out. Elena guided the nearest few toward the stairwell. They moved stiffly, uncertain, as if waking from anesthesia. Each carried the same dazed wonder at the world beyond the chamber. Halfway to the ladder, one girl stopped, her gaze fixed on Elena's badge. "Detective," she whispered, voice thin but lucid. "You came when we called." Elena knelt beside her. "We heard the bell." The girl nodded. "It was lonely in the quiet." A tear traced through the grime on Elena's cheek. "You're not alone anymore." The ground shuddered again. Warning lights flickered red. Cal shouted from below, "Pressure's building!" The rupture's flooding the lower vents. This whole place will cave in. He helped the last child onto the ladder. Steam hissed from ruptured pipes. Water pooled around their boots. One by one they climbed, the blue light dying behind them. When Elena reached the surface, the dawn had just broken. The valley lay hushed under a pale sky. No hum, no bell, only the sound of wind through grass. Cal emerged beside her, soaked and coughing. He looked back at the mouth of the shaft. "It's over." Elena wasn't sure. In the silence, she could still feel a faint vibration underfoot, like a heart not quite finished beating. By mid-morning, the valley had quieted to a fragile stillness. Mist burned away under a weak sun, revealing the children huddled near the tree line, wrapped in blankets from Cal's truck. They sat close together, blinking at the daylight like nocturnal creatures seeing it for the first time. Elena moved among them, taking names where she could, scribbling notes. "Marla Keene," she asked gently. A thin girl raised her hand. Elena offered a smile. "You're safe now." The girl frowned as if puzzling over the word safe. Cal returned from the truck carrying a field radio. "Signal's back. I can reach the regional office." Elena hesitated. "When they hear what we've found, they'll send containment, not rescue." "They'll come either way," Cal said. "Better to call it in ourselves." He tuned the dial. Static hissed. Then a faint voice crackled through. Elena grabbed the receiver. "This is Detective Elena Morrow, badge 1943. We have survivors from case 4732, the Dovemire disappearances. Request immediate medical response." Silence, then a clipped male tone. "Repeat location." She gave the coordinates. The line clicked off without confirmation. "They're coming," Cal said, though his eyes said he wasn't sure. An hour later, dust rose on the far road. 2 black SUVs rolled into the valley, government plates glinting. 4 men in gray field jackets stepped out. No insignia, no greetings. One of them, tall with close-cropped hair, flashed an ID so quickly Elena barely saw it. "Detective Morrow," he said smoothly. "We'll take it from here." "I want names," she replied. "Division of Environmental Safety," he said. "Our jurisdiction." She folded her arms. "These are living victims. They need hospitals, not containment." The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "They'll receive every care necessary." "Please hand over your evidence." Elena held her ground. "Not until I speak to the district commander." He sighed. "You've done admirable work. But this operation is classified." "Stand down." Two of his men were already loading the children into vans, gentle but efficient. The children didn't resist. They moved as they always had, obediently, silently. Cal whispered, "They're taking them back." Elena stepped in front of the last group. "You can't—" The tall man raised a hand. "Detective, I understand you're tired. You've seen things you shouldn't. Take a few days' leave. Someone will contact you." Her pulse pounded. "You can't bury this again." His expression remained calm. "Some stories keep the peace by staying buried." He turned and walked toward his vehicle. The engine started, doors shut with soft finality. Elena stood rooted as the convoy rolled away, the sound fading down the valley road. Only the wind remained. Cal touched her shoulder. "What now?" She watched the dust settle. "We find where they're taking them. And this time, we don't stop until the whole world hears the bell." By dusk, the valley looked ordinary again. The government vans had vanished beyond the hills, leaving only ruts in the mud and a handful of footprints leading nowhere. Elena and Cal stood by the ruined gate, the air heavy with the smell of ozone and damp pine. Cal rubbed his hands together. "They'll bury it again, just like before." Elena stared at the road. "Not if I'm faster." Inside the truck, she powered her laptop from the cigarette socket. The screen flickered, pulling a weak signal from a mobile hotspot she'd rigged earlier. Within minutes, she found the vehicle registry for the plates she'd memorized. "Not Ministry of Environment," she said softly. "These belong to a private contractor, Origin Systems." Cal frowned. "Defense tech?" "Sound mapping, acoustic crowd control. They build prototypes for the ministry." She traced the convoy's last recorded checkpoint. It pointed north, toward an airfield outside the city of Heron. Cal leaned back. "They'll vanish into a hangar. You can't chase them alone." Elena saved the data to a flash drive. "I can't not." They reached the city after midnight. Rain had turned to mist again, wrapping the sodium lights in halos. Heron Airfield stretched along the outskirts, rows of hangars behind wire fencing, a guard booth unmanned this late. Beyond, faint lights glowed from one hangar. Elena parked under the shadow of a decommissioned plane. "That's them." Cal adjusted the binoculars. Inside, men in gray uniforms moved between the black vans. A cargo ramp extended from the hangar floor to a waiting transport aircraft. Metallic crates were being wheeled aboard, too small for equipment, too heavy for ordinary freight. "They're moving the pods," Cal murmured. Elena's pulse quickened. "They're taking them out of the country." She pulled out her camera and began filming through the windshield, grainy but enough to prove movement. "If I can get this to the press." A beam of light swept across the lot. She ducked instinctively. A security patrol vehicle rolled past, its engine low and steady. The driver paused, glanced in their direction, then drove on. Cal exhaled. "We won't get a second warning." Elena kept filming until the last crate disappeared up the ramp. The cargo door closed, hydraulics hissing. Moments later, the aircraft's engines thundered to life, propellers spinning. The sound vibrated through the metal of the truck, deep, rhythmic, familiar. Cal's face went pale. That tone, Elena realized it too. The engines weren't just starting. They were tuned, perfectly, matching the frequency of the bell. As the plane lifted into the mist, the air around them trembled. Elena covered her ears, but the vibration crawled beneath her skin, into her bones. She could almost hear children's voices woven inside the roar, counting softly. 1, 2, 3. The lights vanished into the cloud cover. Silence returned, complete and terrible. Elena lowered the camera. "They're not taking them away," she said. "They're spreading it." By the time Elena and Cal reached the motel on the city's edge, dawn was bruising the sky a dull pink. They hadn't spoken much since the airfield. The hum still clung to them like tinnitus, always just at the edge of hearing. Elena uploaded the footage from her camera, fingers shaking. Grainy frames appeared. Men loading the crates, the aircraft lifting into fog. The audio registered the low vibration clearly, the same impossible frequency that had driven the villagers. "This is enough," she whispered. "Once it's out there, they can't deny it." Cal sat at the small table, staring into the cup of untouched coffee. "You think anyone will believe that a sound can erase memory?" "They won't have to believe," she said. "They'll hear it." She drafted an anonymous message to a journalist she knew. Marina Ives, an investigative reporter who'd once exposed a ministry cover-up about contaminated wells. She attached the file, added a single line. "If this transmission stops, I didn't stop it." When she hit send, the progress bar crawled to 99%, then froze. The laptop screen blinked. Network connection lost. Elena swore under her breath. She checked her phone. No signal. "They're blocking uplinks." Cal stood abruptly. "Then we move. There's a public archive downtown. They can't block everything." The city was stirring as they reached the central district. Commuters moved like ghosts through early light, faces pale, expressions blank. Elena slowed. "Cal, look at them." Every pedestrian they passed walked at the same pace, same measured rhythm. A faint hum drifted from open shop doors. The morning news broadcast bleeding through radios in unison. The sound carried the tone. "They've embedded it," Cal said quietly. "They're transmitting through the public network." Elena felt the pressure build behind her eyes. A dizziness crept in, like the world tilting underfoot. "We have to shut it off." "Can't shut off an entire city's signal," he said, "but maybe we can jam it." They ducked into an alley where a maintenance truck idled unattended. Cal climbed inside, rifling through the equipment box until he found a portable signal modulator. "This could block the frequency within a small radius," he said, "long enough to upload your footage from a clean line." Elena nodded. They powered the device, and for the first time in hours the hum receded, replaced by honest silence. The relief was almost painful. "Go," Cal urged. She connected again. Upload resuming from where it had frozen. 99%. A pause. Then the bar turned green. "Sent," she breathed. But before she could close the lid, a shadow fell across the screen. A reflection in the glass showed a man standing behind her. Tall, gray jacket, familiar face from the valley. "Detective Morrow," he said softly. "We warned you about digging." The man's hand closed around Elena's shoulder before she could move. "Please don't," he said calmly, almost kindly. "We only want to talk." Cal stepped forward. "She's done nothing illegal." The man's smile didn't change. "Interference with classified operations is illegal." He gestured, and two others appeared from the alley's mouth, both in plain clothes, but with the same quiet authority. They guided Elena and Cal toward a waiting van. No raised voices, no force, just inevitability. Inside, the van smelled faintly of antiseptic and engine oil. The windows were blacked out, and the hum of the road blurred time. Elena glanced at Cal. He mouthed, "Stay quiet." After an hour, or maybe more, they arrived at a facility that looked like an abandoned office park. Gray concrete, mirrored glass. No signage. They were led through security doors into a stark room with a table, 2 chairs, and a single overhead light. The tall man entered after a moment, carrying a folder. He set it down, unhurried. Detective Elena Morrow, former Missing Persons Division, Austin PD commendation in 1994 for the Holbrook case. Elena's pulse jumped. You read my record. He nodded. Your curiosity has been consistent for decades. Consistent, she said, or inconvenient. He almost smiled. You saw what we recovered. The children, the valley, the sound. Do you know what happens when truth outruns understanding? Panic, religion, war. You think that justifies kidnapping? He leaned forward slightly. We didn't kidnap them. We woke them, Elena's breath caught. You mean the children? They were not asleep, he said. They were tuned. Their brains adapted to a harmonic resonance. We were studying a natural phenomenon, a geological frequency buried beneath the valley. When the villagers vanished, they were drawn into it. The children survived because their neural plasticity allowed them to synchronize instead of dissolve. You turned them into experiments. He opened the folder. Inside were EEG charts, medical scans, notes marked Cognitive Pattern Synchronization, Phase 6. They are the first generation capable of collective consciousness, he said softly. What you call the tone is not a weapon. It's a bridge. Cal shook his head. You're spreading it through the networks. That's not research. It's control. The man regarded him coolly. Do you really think control and understanding are different? Elena felt the chill deepen. What happens when everyone hears it? He closed the folder. Then the world will stop fighting itself. No secrets. No isolation. The village was our beginning. A seed. You helped us measure its bloom. The door opened behind him. Another agent entered, whispered something in his ear. He nodded. Your message reached your journalist, he said, turning back to Elena. It's everywhere now. Congratulations. You've accelerated the process. He stood, straightening his jacket. You won't be detained. There's no need. Soon, you'll understand, too. The hum began again. Faint, low, everywhere. Elena didn't remember leaving the facility. One moment, she and Cal were in the gray interrogation room. The next, they were standing on the street in the city's fading afternoon light. Her laptop and camera bag returned as if nothing had happened. The hum still threaded the air like electricity after lightning. Pedestrians moved past them, too synchronized, too silent. Every few steps, someone blinked and tilted their head, as though listening to something far away. A low vibration passed through the concrete, the windows, the hollow of Elena's ribs. Cal steadied her elbow. We have to get out of the city. Where? Anywhere with silence. They drove until the skyline shrank into haze. The highway was nearly empty. Radio stations bled static interlaced with the tone. Even switching off the stereo didn't stop it. It was everywhere now. In the transmission towers, the power lines, the blood. By nightfall, they reached a rest stop outside the hills. The truck engine ticked as it cooled. Elena opened her laptop. No signal, no connection. Only the looping image of her own upload reflected in the screen. The cargo plane lifting into mist. The timestamp flickered erratically. Cal poured 2 cups of burnt coffee from a vending machine. You realize what they did, he said quietly. They let you leak it. That video isn't evidence. It's the vector Elena froze. What? They embedded the resonance in the file. Every time it plays, it spreads. They didn't stop you because you're helping them broadcast it. Her throat went dry. Then we shut it down. Cal's laugh was hollow. It's viral, self-propagating. Within hours, it'll be everywhere. Phones, TVs, servers. You'd have to destroy the entire grid. Elena stared at her reflection in the screen. The faint tremor under her skin had returned, pulsing with her heartbeat. There's always a way back, she whispered. But as she spoke, her voice fractured slightly, as if two frequencies overlapped. By morning, headlines filled every available signal. Mysterious audio phenomenon linked to sleep disorder. Global broadcast interference continues. Clips of the leaked footage looped on every channel, subtitled, dissected, remixed. The tone now threaded each version, faint but unmistakable. Elena watched from the motel bed, her hands clasped over her ears. It didn't help. The sound came from inside her skull now, soft, intimate, endless. Cal had barricaded the door, pacing like a caged animal. "I can feel it changing me," he said. "It's not just sound, it's memory. I keep remembering things that never happened." Elena turned to him slowly. That's what they meant by understanding. His eyes were red, unfocused. If it connects us all, what's left of us? Outside, the wind turbines turned lazily, each rotation matching the pulse in her temples. The world had begun to hum in harmony. The following night, rain returned, soft, persistent, like static descending from the clouds. Elena and Cal drove back toward Dovemire in near darkness. The world outside their headlights looked erased, shapes blurred by mist. The road wound between skeletal trees that swayed to a rhythm she could no longer tell was wind or tone. Cal's hands gripped the wheel so tightly his knuckles glowed. "If we can find the generator they built under the well," he said, "we can overload it, reverse the signal before it stabilizes." Elena glanced at him. His voice was thinner now, slightly out of sync, as if delayed by a fraction of a second. "You're changing too," she said softly. "I know." She touched her temple. "It's learning our frequencies." When they crested the final hill, the village appeared below, bathed in ghostlight. Windows glimmered though no one moved inside. The air above the church shimmered faintly as though heat rose from it. They parked by the graveyard. Every headstone hummed faintly beneath the rain, the names vibrating with a rhythm older than language. Elena opened her notebook, the one she'd carried since her first day investigating the case, and drew the pattern she'd seen etched into the bell years earlier. Cal knelt beside her. "That's harmonic notation," he murmured. "It's not sound, it's architecture. A map of resonance." "The bell wasn't forged," she said. "It was found." Thunder rolled. Somewhere below them, the tone deepened, shifting into a lower register that made the ground quiver. The church doors stood open, black against the glowing air. They entered. The bell lay cracked on the floor where the ministry team had left it. Rainwater streamed through the hole in the roof, pooling around it. The puddle shimmered faintly with light from no clear source. Cal crouched, examining the fissure. They replaced the striker with a resonance core. "If I can short the polarity..." Elena barely heard him. Her reflection in the puddle had begun to move independently. The other her raised its hand before she did, lips forming soundless words. "Elena!" She blinked. The voice wasn't from the reflection. It was inside her skull, intimate and impossible. "Lucia!" Cal looked up sharply. "Who?" "My daughter," Elena whispered. "She's part of it now." A shudder passed through the floor. The bell emitted a single, hollow note that seemed to inhale the world. Light burst upward, white and cold, freezing everything in silence for one impossible instant. Cal shouted something she couldn't hear. Then she saw his silhouette fling the core into the water, sparks erupting. The sound cracked, then reversed, folding in on itself like fabric torn through dimensions. When the light faded, Cal was gone. Only the bell remained, silent and blackened, its surface scarred by lightning. Elena fell to her knees. The silence that followed was absolute and wrong. It was the kind of silence that remembered sound. She whispered, "I'm still here." The echo whispered back, "Not for long." When Elena woke, daylight was leaking through the cracked church windows. The storm had passed, leaving a washed, soundless world. The air smelled of wet stone and ash. Her throat was dry, her ears aching with a phantom pressure, as though sound had weight and she'd swallowed too much of it. The bell lay cold beside her, fused to the floor. Its surface, once blackened, now shimmered faintly, veins of silver running through the cracks. She touched it and felt a faint vibration. Not sound, but pulse. A heartbeat. Outside, Dovemire was still. The wind had stopped. The grass glistened under the weak sun, every blade perfectly still. For a moment, she thought the world had truly gone silent. Then she heard it. Birdsong, distant, tentative, uncoordinated. Not harmony this time, but individuality. She almost wept at the dissonance. By the edge of the square lay a single object, Cal's watch, half buried in mud, its second hand twitching spasmodically between ticks. She lifted it gently. The time was frozen at 3:19 a.m., the moment the bell broke. "Cal," she whispered. A voice answered, faint, like the memory of a dream. "He's gone beyond hearing now." Elena turned sharply. No one stood there. The voice was inside again, soft, unthreatening, familiar. "Lucia?" "It's quieter now," the voice said. "You did it. You stopped them." Tears blurred her vision. "Where are you?" "Everywhere they aren't." The words trembled through her mind, dissolving as quickly as they came. She realized the resonance hadn't vanished. It had retreated into her, like a tide waiting for its return. By evening, rescue teams reached the valley. Drones mapped the wreckage. Scientists collected samples, and journalists broadcast live from the churchyard. Elena watched from a distance, wrapped in a blanket someone had offered, her eyes hollow but steady. A man in a gray suit approached. Detective Reyes from the earlier investigation. "We didn't expect survivors," he said softly. "Are you the one who sent the footage?" She nodded. "The government claims it was a hoax," he continued, "but half the country reported hearing it. Hospitals filled with people who can't sleep, who say they remember lives that aren't theirs." Elena's lips parted, but no words came. She felt her pulse sink with a faint vibration beneath the soil, the buried frequency stirring faintly again. Restless. Reyes watched her. "Whatever happened here, it's not over, is it?" Elena met his eyes. "Nothing ever ends. It just changes frequency." He didn't understand. Not yet. Maybe no one would. As dusk deepened, she looked toward the hills. The light there shimmered faintly, the same soft pulse that had once lured the children. Only now it beat slower, gentler, like breathing in sleep. Elena listened. The world was humming again, but this time, the tone was hers. Weeks passed before Elena could leave the valley. The investigation teams packed their equipment and sealed the perimeter. They called it an environmental anomaly, a phrase broad enough to mean nothing. She signed the required forms, nodded at every question, and said she remembered little. The ministry let her go. She returned to the city, to her narrow apartment above the laundromat on Mill Street, the same one she had rented before the case began. Life outside felt muted, as if every sound had been scrubbed too clean. Cars passed, children laughed, neighbors argued. But beneath it all was a constant, subtle rhythm she could not unhear. At night, she recorded it. Her apartment filled with stacks of tapes, each labeled only by date and frequency range. Some nights, the tone rose faintly above the city hum. Other nights, it dipped low and pulsed like a heartbeat. She could feel it aligning with her own. It didn't frighten her anymore. Sometimes she spoke into the recorder. "If anyone finds this, don't try to silence it. Just listen carefully. It's not trying to control us. It's trying to remember the tapes became her company." The world outside moved on. News cycles shifting, documentaries produced about the Dovemire anomaly, public fascination fading. The children recovered from the valley were relocated under new names, their memories fractured but their bodies unharmed. Cal Reeves's name was never mentioned again. Yet every time Elena closed her eyes, she heard his voice in the hum. You can't stop the song. 3 years later, a young journalist named Marina Ives visited her. Elena had stopped answering phone calls by then, but Marina had tracked her through old police contacts. She arrived with a recorder and cautious eyes. I'm doing a follow-up on Dovemire, she explained. They say you were the last person to see it before the ministry demolished the site. Elena smiled faintly. They didn't demolish it. They buried it alive. Marina hesitated. Some people say the sound changed them. Others don't remember hearing anything at all. What do you think it was? Elena leaned back in her chair, listening to the low hum radiating from the walls. We call it resonance, but that's just a word for understanding. The tone connected everyone who'd been forgotten and everyone who wanted to forget. Marina set down her recorder. Do you still hear it? Elena met her gaze. Only when I stop pretending I don't. Silence settled between them, the kind that seemed to breathe. Then, softly, from the corner of the room, a small portable radio crackled to life. It wasn't tuned to any station, but the static carried a whisper of melody, a child's voice humming. Marina stiffened. What is that? Elena's eyes softened. Lucia. She hums when she's near. Before Marina could respond, the light bulb above them flickered twice, syncing perfectly with the hum. Elena reached over and switched off the radio. You should go, she said gently. Once you've heard it, it follows you. That night, Marina uploaded the interview to her private drive but never published it. Within days, she began waking to faint vibrations under her floorboards. When she pressed her ear to the wood, she swore she could hear breathing. The story stayed unfinished, passed from editor to editor like a cursed file. No one wanted to touch it. Yet somehow, fragments of the recording began appearing online, low-quality clips posted to anonymous accounts. Each clip contained that same faint tone beneath Elena's voice. It's not trying to control us. It's trying to remember. Listeners described strange dreams, walking through fog, hearing bells, seeing a village that shouldn't exist on any map. The ministry issued statements denying new incidents, claiming the frequency had been neutralized. But across the world, reports increased. People disappearing for hours, then returning with pale eyes and strange calm, claiming they had just been listening. Epilogue. The Sleepers. 20 years later, an archival team digitizing old police tapes stumbled upon a collection labeled Morrow Investigation Logs, 1989 to 2026. Most were degraded, filled with static. One tape, however, played clearly. Elena's voice, steady, older, quieter. If you're hearing this, it means you've reactivated the sequence. That's all right. It was meant to be found. Every few generations, the world forgets itself. The resonance doesn't erase, it balances. It teaches the noise to rest. She paused, and the faint sound of rain could be heard, though the archivists later swore the tape had been recorded indoors. The village isn't gone. It's beneath us everywhere. Every town that hums at night, every silence that feels too heavy. That's where it's sleeping. If you listen long enough, you'll hear it breathing. The recording ended with the sound of a bell, faint, reversed, impossibly deep. That night, one of the archivists dreamed of standing in a meadow of gray grass under a white sky. Children's laughter drifted through the air, soft and distant. When he turned, he saw a woman watching him from across the field, her hair streaked with silver, her expression calm. She raised her hand, not in warning, but in greeting. Behind her, the village shimmered back into being. Then he woke to silence, the kind that remembers sound,